The Dallas Cowboys have been busy during the Pro Day Circuit. Which guys have they taken a liking to so far in the process? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast
Locked
Network, your
On.
team every day.
Locked on. Locked on. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out at McCoolBCB. Landon, how are you doing today this Friday?
Good. I'm excited to talk about some pro days because I'm just excited as we get closer and closer to the draft to hear more about these guys and see who can be a good fit for us.
So this is the time of year where we start to get hints as to who the Cowboys like, right? I can remember a couple years ago, this is when we really started to hear about like Van Der Esch, right? We started to hear a lot about the Cowboys being interested in Tristan Hill, some more about Byron Jones a few drafts ago. So if you're paying attention, you can start to narrow down some of the guys that the Cowboys like. Let's start at Texas A&M. Kenyon Green and DeMarvin Leal. The Cowboys were at that pro day. Both Mike McCarthy and Dan Quinn were there. We talked about Kenyon Green yesterday. We don't have to talk a ton about him because you guys can go listen to us talk about him for about 10 minutes and how his fit is with Dallas. But the one that's really interesting here is DeMarvin Leal. I actually did a little bit of a deep dive on him yesterday. Going into the season, he was projected to be a top 5 pick. And now he might not even be a top 50 pick. I know you've seen Leal a little bit. What do you think of the player?
You know, I think the issue with him is that generally, I know I'm not the only person who's going to struggle with where to play him. You know, I think he's kind of the classic tweener in the sense that he's a little bit big. He's a supersized defensive end.
Right? Michael Parsons, a good tweener. I
mean, we call the Micah Parsons versatile. You know, when they're bad, we call them tweeners.
Yep.
I mean, in that sense, that it's kind of an either nor situation where, you know, he's a supersized defensive end who doesn't have maybe the kind of twitchy, bendy traits that you look for a lot of defensive ends, and he is probably not big and strong enough to be playing full-time 3 technique.
He's only 280.
Yeah, so and that's the thing, right? 280 is like, ooh, what do I do with you, right? You could be a 5 tech in a one-gapping scheme. I think that guys like that have found success in those kind of schemes. And you know, look, guys like this have found success in 4-3 fronts where they play like a base end and then they kick down inside and rush the passer as a 3 technique on passing downs. But you know, I watch him and a lot of these guys, you know, it's like it feels like they're constantly trying to put a square peg in a round hole by knocking these guys inside. It's like, okay, he's big enough to last inside, but does that mean that he's actually any good at it? I haven't seen a ton. I mean, look, I haven't watched a lot of him, so I need to definitely do more. And so I'm relying on some of your evaluations here. But from what I've seen so far, he looks pretty much like the classic guy where, hey, this guy's talented, but we need to find a way to use him because it doesn't really make sense to make him a full-time defensive end.
I think what's tricky here is when you see a guy that's built like him and he's 280 pounds and you're hoping that he tests like a really good athlete. You're hoping like he runs a sub 4.7 40-yard dash and he's explosive, and he just wasn't. I have his combine numbers right here. 6'4", 283, 33-inch arms, which is actually a little bit below average for like an edge rusher. 5-second 40-yard dash, 28-inch vertical, 106 broad jump. So you're talking about a guy that's like on the edge, a 10th percentile athlete. So not a great athlete. However, man, you see flashes of it. I encourage people to go back and watch the North Carolina game from last year. I think it was the Orange Bowl that they played in. He was incredible in that game. I mean, making plays in the run, shedding blocks, and making tackles in the backfield. He hit Sam Howell 5 or 6 different times in that game. And like you can see when he's on why you would want that player. It just doesn't happen very often. And is it going to happen in the NFL against better athletes? I don't know. But I do think if he gets with a guy like Dan Quinn, I wouldn't hate it because I think there's some potential here, but it's certainly risky.
Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of guys, right, that like I've always struggled with. Yeah, I mean, they're big and they're oversized defensive ends that are not exceptionally athletic. I mean, 6'4", 280 with 33-inch arms is like, where do I play this guy?
It's a weird build. It really is.
It's a very weird build because it's like you'd want him to have 34-inch arms if you wanted to play more of a 5 technique, right? At the minimum, you'd want him to be a little bit heavier and a little bit stronger if you wanted to play him at 3 technique full time. You'd want him to be a little bit thinner and a little more explosive if you're going to play him at 7 or 9 technique all the time. So, yeah, I think he's kind of got that very classic tweener bod. I think his the flashes I certainly have seen there, and I think you talked about the Orange Bowl game. Honestly, I think that's probably why he was getting a lot of top 5 hype, right?
Yeah,
is because you look at the bowl games and who's playing the best football at the end of last year, and you're like, oh, this guy was blowing up. Let's put him at the top of my mock draft for in November of the year before the draft. So I think that I understand why he got pushed up to a certain degree. I think right now he's suffering from kind of not being that player even after being artificially pushed up, and now teams including and draft folks like you and myself are trying to figure out exactly what his real value is, right? Because he just got so artificially inflated. He does have value, but he's not by any means, an elite athlete. In fact, his athleticism is probably working against him. So you'd like to see more production if you're not going to see that athleticism, but you don't see that production consistently. It's tough, man, because you see him do it sometimes, and that's what scouts will tell you. If you've seen him do it before, they can replicate that. They can do it again. But I don't have a level of confidence that that he's certainly going to come in here and without a doubt be a contributor on an NFL team.
So my guess is that the Cowboys feel the same way, that we do. Like they just don't know, and that's why they're at the pro day, and that's why they're having him in for a 30 visit, is so they can find out either way, because he is one of the more polarizing prospects in this class because he's clearly talented. But what happened this year? Why wasn't the production super good? Why didn't he get better from his sophomore tape? I don't know. And maybe they're trying to figure that out. I think when you see his body, though, you're expecting him to be like Jonathan Allen, the Alabama defensive tackle, who was kind of that same size, right? 6'4", 283. You're wanting him to be a dominant player like that. And you just don't always see it.
And look, this is important stuff, and getting this kind of context is how you potentially get a steal later on in the draft, right? Is if there's reasoning, if there's like a thought process there to why he didn't produce that well, then maybe you get the opportunity to get a very valuable player in a later round pick, and I think that also applies to someone. Like Sam, is it Williams?
Sam Williams from Ole Miss. Yeah, we're going to talk about him. Yeah.
Same sort of situation, right? Where this is a talented player. We'll talk about it in a sec, but he's probably going to get drafted later because of some off-field stuff.
Yeah.
If you could wrap your hands around that, you might be able to draft a guy in a later round that is a benefit because you have the most information there, right?
Yep.
I think the same thing with Leal, right? They're trying to get as much information to see, all right, is this guy a better player than his production showed us last year? Is this guy got more upside? Or are we able to get a steal in the 4th round in this guy because people don't see the context of why he was struggling last season? Those are the kind of situations are why the Cowboys have that really good scouting staff, is so that they can try to get those steals kind of in the 4th or 5th round where they just have more information than the other teams, and that helps them make the best pick.
Yeah, just to tie a knot on this one, tie the bow on this one. Sorry. In 2020, his grade for PFF was 88.3. He had 9 QB hits. He had 20 hurries. I mean, he had his pass rush grade was really good, like phenomenal. This year, the grade's down. The sacks were up, but the quality wasn't quite as good. So you want to see, like, was there something going on this year? Was he battling an injury? Was it a scheme change? I think those are just all things the Cowboys are going to try to learn about him over the next month. And I would not be surprised if this is somebody who Dan Quinn maybe likes a little bit. We saw Marlon Davidson, in 2020. That's a guy that Dan Quinn drafted. Very similar, right? That was a second-round pick, Marlon Davidson. Maybe the Cowboys are looking to do something similar. All right, let's talk about Sam Williams from Ole Miss. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline. It's that time of year again as college basketball tournament season is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. BetOnline also released their win total odds today. They have the Cowboys sitting at 10.5. Does that feel right?
I think that sounds. I mean, look, we don't have all the information yet, so they're just trying to get right, people that are. It feels what?
It feels right.
Yeah, that feels appropriate for what we know right now. Yeah.
I mean, you look at the rest of the NFC, and man, if you are a competent franchise, you're going to win 9 games in the conference. So shouldn't be that hard. All right. Let's talk about Sam Williams. So I know a lot of draft shows have been talking about him the last couple of days. We don't have to spend a ton of time on him, but Dan Quinn went to Ole Miss's Pro Day. He did all the drills with Williams. He actually worked him out on the side after the Pro Day. Very intriguing player. What do you think?
Did you see the interview with him?
Yes, and he was talking about Jerry Jones, and I think it was one of his kids with him.
He did have one of his kids with him, but dude looks exactly like Micah Parsons. Have you seen it? Like, especially like right in this area, like his eyes, it's crazy. Like, and everyone else has commented, and it was funny that he mentioned Micah Parsons because it was like, he looks exactly like Micah. It's pretty funny. I mean, this is a guy that came onto the radar late. We all heard about the Cowboys were interested in him and that they worked him out at the Pro Day. I think it's funny when I heard his name again, I was like, I swear I know that name. And I did, because I remembered when he was suspended from Ole Miss. I think that's, again, like we talked about it earlier, this is a situation where they are potentially looking for bargains. They're looking for a guy that's, I mean, we've all seen the numbers. He's 250 plus pounds. He runs a 4.46. He's got incredible jumps and he's got explosiveness. He didn't do any agility drills, and I think that's probably a choice. Because you watch the tape a little bit, and he's not flexing his ankle to kind of
he's not a bendy
corner or get back. Under.
Right.
That's not his guy. This is a speed to power guy, right? Like, so I think that he has potential very good usage in the NFL, though. I mean, I think that's winning around the corner may not be his edge, but there's his way to win. But there are lots of guys out there who play with his kind of game and have success, and I think that he can put pressure immediately on quarterbacks just because he gets off the ball so quickly. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is what happened with the situation that was the dropped sexual assault case while he was there that caused him to be suspended. He had some other stuff, I think, also in high school as well. So there is some history there. There is some stuff that needs to be investigated. That's kind of why a guy that is as talented as he is potentially going to be available later than the first or second round, and that's honestly why the Cowboys, I think, are kicking the tires on him, is that
absolutely
they could potentially get a guy that could come in and give them contribution at the position while still being able to use maybe their first 2 picks. I don't know. Depending on where this guy is, second, third round.
My guess is, you're looking 3rd, 4th round, somewhere.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then you could still go in there, get your wide receiver, get your offensive lineman, and still get a guy that you feel like in the 3rd or 4th round that you could draft, and if he can keep his nose clean, can contribute to the pass rush, hopefully right away.
I think you nailed the whole situation. The only thing I would say is I hate the Ole Miss defense that has it basically playing like a 4 technique or whatever.
Yeah.
It put me back to the days of watching Charles Tapper at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And actually, that might not be a
technique.
It might not be a bad comp considering Tapper was the same way, where he was incredibly fast but really couldn't change direction. I think he's better than that. He can't really bend. But you can still win a lot in the NFL if you are explosive and you play hard. Like, you can will yourself into a bunch of sacks. Like, I think he could be a Tack McKinley level player in the NFL if things work out right. And I kind of have a feeling that's what Dan Quinn sees here too. So if you're just getting somebody with rare speed off the edge and he busts his butt and he plays so hard, you can get a pretty good player here.
I think it's worth mentioning that maybe, because of the way they used him a little bit, maybe there's some upside in his flexibility there.
He's also pretty new to football. That's also going to help.
So I think there may be the possibility that you can get, a little bit more flexibility out of him. You get him working specifically with some of these guys like Chuck Smith or someone like that who can kind of just help him, loosen his hips a little bit, just kind of, get him doing those techniques. I mean, when you're playing 4 technique, you're not necessarily trying to dip underneath the table like you are with the 7 and 9 technique. I mean, you're trying to get around or through guys. So there is, I think, potential there for him to kind of, improve there. And like I said, not that he necessarily needs it to be productive in the NFL.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some other guys the Cowboys have met with. Jelani Woods, the tight end from Virginia. They were at his pro day. The Cowboys tight end coach, I think it's Luda Wells, I believe is his name, did his workout there. And the Cowboys have also put in a 30 visit for him. So there's clearly some interest here. You want to talk about a big athletic tight end. And according to the relative athletic score, the most athletic tight end in NFL history.
So can I tell you the sequence of events of how this unfolded to me?
Sure.
So I had seen Jelani Woods. I like everybody else. I like to do the mock draft simulators. I like to see, what the consensus is on a lot of these players. I am consistently seeing Jelani Woods as available for the Cowboys to pick, in the 5th round,
sure,
whatever. Yeah. So I started to check him out, because I hadn't really seen very much of him. So I'm watching him. And he looks like a deer playing tight end, or he doesn't look like he completely knows what he's doing, but it still was working all the time. He had no issues, the background here is that this is a guy who spent, I think, 3 years at Oklahoma State as a wide receiver. Right. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know the specifics, but I know that he transferred to UVA, and now became a tight end, and he kind of looks like a wide receiver playing tight end. Yeah. But I will say this: the difference between him playing tight end, having been a former wide receiver, versus a lot of other guys that I've seen try to make that transition, is that he is a much more physical player than I think a lot of the wide receivers that you see, and he has no issue. In fact, he enjoys mixing it up. So
I just want to tell you a play that I watched last night. I don't even remember who it was against, but they threw him a post route, and there was a guy on his back, and the safety came up to try to dislodge the ball, and Woods caught it, and the safety just crumbled right underneath him, and didn't affect Woods at all. And this guy is massive. He's huge tight end.
He's very big, and you watch it, he's just he's not graceful, I guess is what it is. And it's because I don't think he's, the grace at those positions come from doing those steps over and over and over and over and over and over.
He needs
running those routes over and over again. Yeah. He just needs experience there. But having said that, he just looked dominant. He was just, because he was so much bigger, so much faster and stronger than everybody else. So as I'm reading this, as I'm watching this, I'm like, this guy's, and I even think I DM'd you guys. I was like, have you guys watched Lonnie Walker's pretty? Yeah. And then as that is going on, Math Bomb starts tweeting out his pro day numbers. And I'm suddenly like, oh my God, he got a perfect 10 in the RAS, and he's like
Mhm.
the most athletic tight end I think that they've graded in the database so far. Do you have the numbers in front of you?
I do. So it's 6'7" and 1/8, 253 pounds, 82-inch wingspan. He's got a 4.61 40-yard dash. He has a 38-inch vertical. I can pull up the rest of the stuff. It even like the agility stuff is
Agility's really good.
Here, I got it right here. I just had to pull it out. I was looking at the mock draftable. Yeah, 10-yard split, which is the fastest ever that we've seen from a tight end. The bench was 24. I mean, he's incredible. I will say I first heard about him. Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman were doing a Shrine Bowl preview, basically, of all the guys that were going to the Shrine Bowl. And they were talking about Woods, and this is a unique tight end. He's a little older, 24. I know it hurts my heart to say that, but
Marcus is really coming off his age.
I know,
guys.
I know.
Like now that he's getting older, he feels a little bit more.
Yeah, that's true. I'm getting old now. And then from everybody that was at the Shrine Bowl said he was by far the best player in the practices. He goes out and catches a touchdown in the game, and then I texted Eric Galco yesterday, just kind of asking about him. Hey, 5th, 6th round for Cowboys, and he said he might be there at 56.
At 56, really?
There is a lot of buzz in the NFL that he could potentially be tight end 1 in this class because there's just not a lot of guys that look like him.
That's the thing, right? And here's the other thing that I tweeted about that I think is something that I've been screaming about for a long time, and I think this is something the NFL believes. Tight ends don't come into the NFL ready to go. They just don't. Yep. You got to rebuild your tight end, no matter who he is. When he comes in, Kyle Pitts, I mean, they're using him as a wide receiver while they're trying to teach him the tight end position, which is probably what you need to do, which is why you can justify taking him in the top 5 or top 10, right?
Yeah.
But my whole thing is that short of Kyle Pitts, if you need a tight end, you're going to build your own. So if you're going to build your own, get the best athlete. Get the guy that has the physical temperament. Get the guy that has the tools, the tools you need to build a tight end. Don't try to get a guy who necessarily had incredible production, but you still have to rebuild from the ground up and is an average athlete. It doesn't make much sense. So I'm certainly not advocating to go all the way the route of the Baylor basketball player as your tight end. But
why not?
We've tried that. I think that this is a great example where this is a guy has untapped potential, has shown the ability, has played tight end at a high level, Division I football. I mean, not a ton, but he's played it, right? Yeah. I think that these are the kind of routes that I would go when I'm trying to build a tight end, because you're just not going to draft a guy, and who's just going to be plug and play, ready to play as an inline wide tight end. It's too difficult a position to learn.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I saw it, but I saw that he has over 20, 30 visits that teams have requested, and he can't do them all. So he's just kind of picking and choosing the teams that he thinks would make the most sense, because there's so many people just interested in him as a prospect. And we know the Cowboys have a lot of interest. How high? I don't know, but this is one definitely to keep an eye on.
I like him a lot. I really, really do like him for all the reasons I mentioned. But
that's rich, but
for a guy who's played 1 year of tight end, I think he had like 500 yards receiving or something. Yeah. He did have 8 touchdowns, which, that kind of speaks to his, mismatched nature. Yeah. But still, that is not a ton of experience or a ton of production for a guy you're talking about a second-round pick. Yeah.
Now, I if I had to bet, I think he's a top 100 pick. That also might be, listen, Eric Galco runs the Shrine Bowl. He's probably sticking up for his guy a little bit. Let's just
good for him.
Let's
too.
Be honest.
Should.
Yeah, good for him. And this is what he should be doing. I still top 100 pick all day.
That's
we got another tight end that the Cowboys are really interested in. I want to talk about him next, but let's tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of year, almost everybody has given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours to eat better, thanks to Built Bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they only contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to your average candy bar that has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs, and it's not even really a contest. They've got so many great flavors, including mint brownie, coconut almond, and the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, another really interesting tight end that the Cowboys have shown a ton of interest in is Charlie Kohler from Iowa State. Obviously, they saw him at the Senior Bowl. Kellen Moore went to Iowa State to watch him work out. So did Luda Wells. Kohler is somebody that I've liked for a while. We've mentioned him on the podcast, but I did not expect him to test as well as he did. At his pro day, he was 6'6.5". He ran a 4.67 40. He had a 35-inch vertical. He had a 10-foot broad jump, and his three cone was 6.98, which is pretty incredible for a guy that big in at that size. So I like Kohler. I think he probably projects more as a tight end too than Jelani Woods does right away. Have you seen him yet?
I haven't seen much, honestly. I think I've watched some, YouTube clips of him, but I haven't actually studied him yet. So, I mean, he looks the part of everything you're saying, and I certainly didn't see that kind of athleticism.
Once you do a deep dive on him, you are going to love him because he's just one of these guys that is so big and knows how to use his size. He's not like overly dynamic after the catch, but when you're that big and you just fall forward every time, I mean, it's really hard to stop him. He reminds me a lot of Cole Kmet coming out of Notre Dame a couple years ago, and I think he might even be a little bit more fluid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for. I like those type of tight ends, the guys that that are big, that can move bodies off the line, and then they're just big targets in the middle of the field for your quarterback. And yeah, maybe they're not like running through the secondary after they catch, but getting 10 yards and then falling forward, that works as well. That gets you the first down too. So,
yeah, and looking at PFF and their stats, he's graded at least 85 in 3 straight years at Iowa State. He's a well above average blocker. He doesn't drop any passes. He's number 1 in contested catch rate for them, number 1 in yards after the catch for them. I mean, he's just been really, really solid for the last couple of years. The last couple guys that we should talk about are the 2 Ohio State receivers, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Kellen Moore went to watch them at Ohio State. Chris Olave, I believe I saw that he's going to be a 30 visit for the Cowboys. Is that surprising to you at all?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the Cowboys have a spot for a wide receiver to draft, and I had Chris Olave as I think my favorite wide receiver in this class as it stands. I think for the Cowboys, Williams would be a better fit, and Williams might be. I like Williams and Olave almost very similarly. Yeah. But I think it makes a lot of sense that they would go through and look at these wide receivers, and certainly certainly isn't surprising they're looking at Garrett Wilson either. I think Garrett Wilson's all these guys are all I think very similarly ranked. They're all very different players,
and they probably have no idea who's going to go early and who's not. Like I think once you get past the first 11 picks, who knows who might fall to you.
It's going to be ice cream with these wide receivers. Sure. It's Baskin Robbins, as Broadus says, because each one of these guys has got a completely different set of skills, and they're all going to be used in completely different ways. And so teams are going to value their skill sets differently. So, some teams are going to have the USC kid because he's big and strong and he's, they like having a possession receiver. Other teams are going to look at him and say, he looks a lot like Treadwell, or looks like a lot like these other guys that, that we said, oh, don't worry, they can't separate, but they can get into the league and they'll catch the ball and not, they don't. So some guys are going to look at Garrett Wilson and Olave and say, we need a little bit more size, So I think that they're going to stack all these guys differently. They're and that's the other thing too, is that there's like 6 of them that are all really good, and so.
They just need to know when they're on the board, if Garrett Wilson would happen to fall to them, is that somebody that we feel comfortable taking at 24?
I feel certain they have a preference, but you're right. Like you got to be prepared for the scenario where suddenly Olave's in a free fall, we want the faster guys or we want the bigger guys. And we feel like Olave is neither nor, and he falls into your lap at 24. Are you going to take the best route runner in coming out in the draft this year? Absolutely. But you got to be sure that he fits your team. And so if you haven't done any of the due diligence there, you need to be prepared. And at this draft more than any, I mean, not even just wide receivers, it could go a whole bunch of different ways with the lack of top end quarterbacks and defensive ends. I mean, you say what you want about Thibodeau and Hutchinson. It's like the top of the draft could be crazy, which will obviously filter down to the middle of the draft. So the whole first round could be a complete crapshoot. So you really you have to have an idea of what these guys are like. Because any number of them, I mean, it could be 20 different guys that could end up at 24 that you like. You gotta know all of them.
Yeah, I think they also went to see Jeremy Rucker at the tight end, but he was in a walking boot, didn't work out at the combine, didn't work out at the pro day. I know he's somebody that we talked about early in the process as maybe a second or third round pick. Now it's a little scarier.
I hate seeing these kids get injured, during this process, or it's just.
Because there's just not a lot separating Jeremy Ruckert from the next tight end. And if you're talking about a guy that might not be available during off-season stuff, you could go easily in another direction. Like, it would not surprise me at all. We're talking about Jeremy Ruckert on day 3 as an option for the Cowboys in the 4th round now. It's too bad for him because he's a very talented tight end. All right, that is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Locked On Cowboys over there. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great weekend, everybody.